Okay, so our next is it's a wonderful group that we have up here for a panel discussion. So the panel will be moderated by UST's AI Product Marketing Manager, Carl Hillier. Joined today from OpenText, the Senior Global Product Marketing Manager, Laurence O'Brien in the middle, and Aviva Investors CIO, Paul Kane, down at the end. Now, we hope you gentlemen will play nice and enjoy the wonderful panel discussion. So I'll turn it over to you, Carl. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis. Everyone hear me okay? So my apologies for the proximity of the podium. For those of you that are directly between me and it, you can't see me, but that's okay because all the information that's of any use is going to come from these two gentlemen to my left. The topic of this presentation is really about how AI is having a direct impact in a variety of different vertical markets. And AI is not a one-size-fits-all. You know, I have a maxim which is no company got better or smarter by buying a bucket full of AI. And as you heard from certainly the two presenters we've had already, it's about what you do with it and how you use it that will generate a positive business outcome. So turning to my esteemed panelists here, perhaps Paul, if I can go to you first, and if you can perhaps kind of in 2 minutes or less, describe really the impact that AI is having in the asset management arena, which is obviously the one that you operate in at Aviva.
Yeah, so louder than I thought. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the Chief Information Officer at Aviva Investors. We are the investment arm of the Aviva Insurance Group. We manage about 230 billion of assets under management. That's across a range of products, so fixed income, equities, real assets, etc. So AI is not new. I'm sure you are well aware of that. It's also our initials, which is a bit confusing. So we used to refer to ourselves a lot as AI. As soon as you say that now, everyone thinks artificial intelligence. So just to clarify, it's Aviva Investors. But AI is not new. We've been using it as part of our investment process for a number of years. What is new is generative AI, and I think that is the big differentiator in terms of it's disrupted things. It's from an investment process, there's lots of opportunity, whether it's around research, whether it's around our investment decisions. We can get information into our investment professionals' hands a lot quicker than we could previously. So that's good and bad, and I think we'll talk a bit later in terms of some of the challenges and how we need to work differently as a business. But as part of our business, it's technology is intrinsic. I think if you'd gone back 5+ years ago, the CEO, CFO, etc., their requirement of me was just to keep the lights on, not to break anything. Whereas nowadays we are very much, first conversation. There is a fear of missing out around this. Heather was talking about the hypes curve, etc. I'm sure you'll come away from today and say you've heard from different organisations doing different things. Why aren't we doing that? So as a business, that's something that we're kind of working through. But AI itself is, as I said, there's lots of opportunities. We're starting to explore more of the generative side of things. We have got a walled garden approach, so Heather kind of alluded to that earlier in terms of how do we keep it safe, secure, IP, etc. But yeah, from an investor's point of view, there's lots of opportunity around efficiency, optimization. High value activity can now be done, we can spend more time on it, and the skilled professionals, where we have got that's our IP, the skilled people can then make more informed decisions. So that's a brief overview of Aviva Investors.
Can you give an example that springs to mind of a particular implementation and how it's transformed your business?
Yeah, so the ability to use natural language to query fund prospectuses, so essentially brochures, that ability has then enabled us to review and stock select at a much quicker rate than previously. So you could have a research analyst go across 100 different potential assets that we were looking at and make a much quicker and informed decision around it. So that's an easy implementation, and the natural language part of it means that you're as good as your prompt, really, and that's, as an organisation, something that we're really focusing on in terms of upskilling our people to be able to become prompt engineers and work within our business with pulling out key information to make quicker decisions.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the conferences I've been at, the number one question comes up is, is AI going to put me out of work? And I think the key thing to stress here is that AI is enabling people as a tool rather than necessarily substituting.
Absolutely, and I mean, we talk about it internally, and AI won't, but people who use AI will. If you think about it that way, so we need to be on the front foot around this. But at the same time, as we were talking about earlier, the regulation is key. Our investment processes are heavily regulated. We need to have traceability in terms of any investment decisions that we're making. So it's not the Wild West. We have got a very controlled environment.
So Laurence, you're approaching it from a slightly different perspective as a provider at OpenText. Over the last couple of years, and as Heather was talking about, the kind of explosion of obviously ChatGPT is the thing that people tend to gravitate to as the kind of, if you like, the point from which everything has come from at that point, although that's not totally true. How has it impacted what you're bringing to market for your customers at OpenText?
That's an excellent question. I think firstly, anyone in this room doesn't know who OpenText is. Feel free to raise a hand. That's okay. We prefer honesty and candor. So we're a very large software vendor. We're based out of Waterloo in Canada. Bear with me. And we own about 800 products, people across the globe. We're a multi-billion-dollar organization. And up until about 4 years ago, we were talking about the fact that we do information management and governance and content, and we would talk about that, and we would always talk about the fact that you already have all the information you need. Are you best using it? I came from a group who've been doing AI since 1996, and much as Paul said, we've been using AI for years. The difference is now in the last few years, you can't have a group of more than 10 people without starting a conversation about Aviva investors, about AI. But we've always looked at it from the point of view of augmented intelligence, the idea being that we're providing a better environment for the workers, which is what you were alluding to as well, Paul. And so for us, the big change in the last couple of years is people want to talk about AI. Whereas before, people were not necessarily talking a lot about AI, unless you were working in security services and in intelligence and that sort of stuff, which we do. And some of my biggest customers I can't talk about, which has always made it very difficult to talk about AI. But now generative AI has come about, everyone's talking about it. So for us, there is now an expectation that starts with AI. So I do content management, but how do we use AI to help that? So we've gone from the point of view of we already do the stuff in the background, whether that's ITOM or ADM or that sort of stuff, whether we're dealing with data loss prevention partners, we talk about what we do, but AI is now always in the conversation, whereas before no one would talk about it unless they're in intelligence and security or finance, actually. It was always very key in finance.
I mean, obviously, OpenText is a very broad portfolio.
Sure.
How have you seen over the last couple of years your customers' and prospects' expectations as it relates to AI?
I think the biggest change that we've seen is an expectation, as Paul talked about, is that you would say, you're going to do something. I'm going to look at a set of contracts. I'm dealing with a legal case. I'm looking at engineering processes and frequently asked questions. You used to expect that you would go and fill in a search criteria somewhere, and it would come back with a lot of stuff for you to read. And then it was a lot of stuff for you to watch on YouTube and that sort of stuff. Now there's an expectation amongst the greater audience, because it's not just about people in business, it's about everybody talking about. There's an expectation that I ask a question and you give me an answer. So implementing conversational chat interfaces into pretty much every single one of our products that relates to has become, well, as something we just did immediately. That this became, as soon as a conversation, I mean, the funny thing about a software vendor is, especially one as big as OpenText, is, well, what do you do? Well, what do you want? And so for us, the clients are saying, I really like this. I really like the fact that I've got document management, I've got content management, and I can look up all my contracts. But what I don't want to do is go and read those 20 documents now. I have an expectation that I should be able to interrogate that information conversationally. And that's how we've reacted, by implementing that across so many of our products and our portfolios.
Yeah, AI definitely acts as a democratizing influence as far as
Right.
intelligent access to
You don't need to be a trained investigator now. You just need to know how to ask the right questions, which it does come back to prompt engineering. You know, how do you ask that question? And at the moment, you know, conversational chat UI is, I have a limited amount of characters and tokens with which to put the information together that I want you, Mr. LLM, to be able to define what is the best, most accurate response to that question against the information that you've given me. For us, historically, we didn't have to connect to the internet. So when we were dealing with finance organizations, they loved the fact they didn't need to connect to the internet. Even now, when we talk to government and federal organizations in the United States, you still don't need to be connected to the internet, even if you're using LLMs. I mean, how many people here have actually got an LLM client on their laptop or desktop? God bless you. It's just the 4 of us. But in that, it's only like 3 to 5 gig of data, and then you can run it you're running it locally, you're not on the internet. So that sort of level of worry of security kind of goes away in some ways. And that's a very broad and complete answer from a very broad company.
Now, Paul, if I can ask that same question but in a slightly different vein, I mean, obviously your customers, unlike Laurence's, obviously work for your own organization. You know, what are their expectations now? And obviously people becoming a lot more aware of what AI can do in their own personal lives. How's that changed in terms of how you're servicing your customers internally and what their expectations are?
I mean, you just summed it up brilliantly there by Laurence in terms of the expectations are now that the technology and the opportunity is there in their hands, because this is the great disruptor. They've gone from an environment where overnight ChatGPT's exploded, the majority of people have got it on their own personal devices. They come into the organisation, they've got this capability in their hand, and they become frustrated that they can't deploy it in a work context. So, you know, I think what it's also done is it's essentially made everyone a technologist, and you know, we're then using, you know, prompts to write Python and SQL, and actually from a data science perspective, what that is enabling for me and our investment teams is to create an investment engineering community that is sat on the investment desks, and they're able to use this capability to really, you know, do some very, very complex work around the data that they're sourcing. I mean, and the thing is as well, historically there's been a lot of back testing around some of the AI use that we've been having, but now it's a lot more forward-looking. So for me, you know, leading a technology function within an investment organisation now, the challenge is managing expectations around all of the software houses that we work with, deploying co-pilots within their tooling. Every salesperson will speak to me, you know, daily about new opportunities, and it's about identifying where the value is to our business. And Heather talked about this in terms of, you know, proof of concepts and working it through, because you could waste a hell of a lot of money and time going after the wrong thing. So I think if you look at what your problem is to start with, and what needs to be solved, and then get the solution, rather than the challenge that I have is, you know, I'll go back to the office today and a number of people will come to me with a number of solutions that are pre-packaged, but it might not be what we necessarily need. So that's the challenge, but that's a good thing though, as you know, it's disrupting, it's generating change at a pace that we haven't seen before, or not since the sort of internet boom really in that sense, but it's kind of generational disruption, and now everyone, you know, essentially is a technologist in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, you've almost gone from, you know, trying to knock on the door to pushing against an open door. Now people are opening the door for you and dragging you through it.
Absolutely.
And obviously, you've got to figure out which are the ones. And how do you do that? I mean, obviously, if you've got lots of people saying now, not reacting to what you're providing, but actually saying, well, I've got this idea, I want to do this, or I want to do this. How do you go about prioritizing in terms of where, you know, because you could do probably 10 times the things that you actually end up doing. How do you prioritize, okay, this is where I'm going to go first?
Yeah, so what we've done is we quickly pulled together a technology enablement group across our organisation last year. So essentially product owners within each function to look at each opportunity, look at the business case, what the potential return on investment will be, or the risk of inaction. So another way of looking at ROI in terms of if we if we miss out on this, what would what are our competitors doing, what are our peers doing, etc. So, that group with essentially prioritising based on business value. Now we've gone big in terms of colleague assistance tooling. So everyone within Aviva Investors has, basic Copilot chat. We've also got Microsoft 365 Copilot fully deployed, Teams Premium. So we're trying to drive efficiency and then opportunity, and then more now looking at agentic AI. So again, working with Microsoft and ChatGPT in terms of some proof of concepts, but really what's the value, what's the business case, and challenging on that, because we could be distracted and go after the wrong things. And then there's a big question as well, do we buy versus build? And if we buy now, 6 months later, is that going to be integrated in a product and we don't have to pay for it? So there's a real kind of risk-based conversation around that as well.
Yeah, and you also end up with potential technical debt where you've invested in something, and then by the time you've deployed it, things have moved on. I mean, Laurence, from your perspective, I mean, given how fast-moving the market is, and hard to think how long ChatGPT has been around. I mean, we had someone recently, and we hired someone into UST, and one of the technical guys came up to me. This guy's fantastic. He's got 2 years of experience. I mean, it gives us an idea of the kind of realm in which we're operating. But in terms of those fast-moving expectations, how do you address that? Because obviously, when you start talking to a prospect, they want one thing, and then maybe 3 months from now, they want something completely different.
And I think that was a good point you made, Paul, there as well. It's the fact that by the time you've implemented something, the market's moved on, or their expectations have moved on. So for us, as a software vendor, we moved all our engineering into a 90-day cycle. So every 90 days, we roll around a new version of about 800 products, which is an enormous uplift. From doing it twice a year, historically, to now moving it to 4 times a year, because things do change, and I think the pushback on that to a certain extent is, if you've purchased a solution because it solves a specific set of problems, if you take 2 months to implement it, it's still going to solve that problem. So you don't have to worry about, I think, too much. That knee-jerk, but I want the latest version of this, or I want the latest version of that. Because usually you're buying a solution, you're buying something that solves a problem, or solves a set of problems. I think the other thing is the fact that, despite so much stuff moving so quickly, it tends to be against performance, especially around things like ChatGPT. For us, having done AI for, as long as I haven't had hair, it is very much the things do change, but I tell you what doesn't change. What doesn't change is your content, what you are generating every day, from documents and that sort of stuff. It doesn't change. And a lot of people in their preparation and their concern, especially around, as you said, Paul, everyone else is doing this. What do we need to be doing it? And then there's certainly a C-level, pressure of, as it used to be in the day, I was down the club and had a conversation, and Roger over at such and such, they're doing this, or you'd have a Sunday supplement that, from various newspapers, displaying my age there. Most people in the room like, newspapers? The idea that those sort of things are a pressure, they are, because you're looking for the economics of, I want better prioritization, I want better performance, I want people to do more in the time that they have. And so that pressure then meets the upward, I've got a whole load of stuff that I need to do on a day-to-day, right, from an IT perspective. And being able to say, I have to prepare, because the C-levels want to see preparation, because you don't want to make a leap into technology you're not sure about. The one thing that most people haven't done yet is lined up the ducts of their content. Do you know where all your data is? Do you have access to all your data? Have you organized the security around access to all your data? That actually needs to be done first. Now, I would have told you that in anticipation for disaster recovery back in the day, or I would have told you about it from an archiving perspective to lower the cost of your tin, because if you put it on cheaper storage, this is not a new conversation, but you're preparing for absolute shift in how you do business, and that's what AI is going to bring. But the stepping stones in preparation, when the C-level says we must have this, is still to get the ducks in a row of making sure you've actually got your content stored securely. Because when you let loose the dogs of AI, you have to be careful where your security is before you release them. Or in the case of, AI itself, is a significant investment in time and effort, I would imagine, in preparation for that, which is a good way. That's the way to do it. Have that conversation, talk to the senior executives, make their expectations realistic, prepare your data for that in anticipation, and then you're going to be able to invest in AI. And when you do that, sure, you're right. It's going to be, everything's changing so quickly. But is it really changing that quick? I mean, it is from a technological perspective, but is it really changing in the next 3 months how you're going to do business? It may change how quick your responses are, right? When they do that conversational chat and they're looking into their investment portfolio, and I don't want to read 40 documents. I want to be able to ask the questions of it. The qualitative questions, the speed of response, that sort of stuff will get faster, sure. But actually what your people do is not going to change fundamentally in the next 3 months.
No, exactly. The business model has remained the same and will remain the same. I think the opportunity is how quickly we can service our clients, our customers, etc. So, and the quality of the sort of data, assuming the data is correct. I mean, that's the absolutely bang on there in terms of what the colleague assistance tooling doing is exposing where you've got multiple versions of the same policy, documents. It's, whereas historically someone would have found it, looked at it, thought I'm going to go to the latest version rather than the co-pilot just pulling up the, whichever one it finds.
Yeah. So we work on the idea that we have a 90-day engineering cycle, but we're secure in the knowledge that certain elements are not going to move so fast that that's not quick enough. And 800 products at 90 days is quite a big lift for us. Even from a marketing perspective, you've got to have something new to say. And it's quite good for us. We have a product that does file content extraction. So we extract data out of files and we sell it into... Okay, quickly run through my mind as to what I can say. So McAfee, if you're using McAfee, it has to open up all the stuff that's going through email so it can check it doesn't have a virus in, right? Well, we now, as of this morning, it was 2,224 file types, which is a lot. But next 90 days, I bet you we got 20, 30 more. So we are quick, but the problem doesn't necessarily move faster than a reasonable engineering pace.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I mean, obviously, as far as the underlying that technology and the capabilities of AI
Sure.
is very fast moving. But to your point, if you build something with AI and it solves a business problem, that doesn't mean that just because this new wacky thing comes out that I should drop that and look at something else. In the same way that I say to my kids, yes, I know the iPhone 16's come out, but there's nothing actually wrong with your iPhone 14. So don't.
Of course there is. It's the iPhone 14, Dad. Come on.
Yeah,
I want the 16.
It comes in a better color.
Joe in my class had the 16 before even it came out on the market. I must have it.
Yeah.
But you're right. But that's the wrong argument.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the way you should deal with it. Just not.
Oh,
I'm
no.
not teaching you parenting. But it kind of works on the idea when they say, I want the iPhone 16. You say you can have the iPhone 16 or you can have the latest Xbox, PS2, go on a holiday, whatever it is. The thing that they've spoke about 1 week before the 16 came out, you say, well, do you want that or do you want this? Or, as my father did, God bless him, is we'll talk about it next week. And next week, I don't even remember what the iPhone was.
It'll be the iPhone 17.
Yeah, probably the iPhone 17. But the question is, and it's a very valid one, and let's use the iPhone as the example because it's always good to have a poke at another manufacturer or vendor, is what is the difference? Who here knows what the difference is between the latest iPhone and the 2 versions ago? Bingo! Give that man a box of chocks.
And it comes in a nicer color, as my daughter always tells me.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's a fairly good reason, I have to say.
Okay. We've got a few more minutes left. I mean, one of the things that Heather touched on in her presentation was kind of responsible AI and regulations. Paul, if I could perhaps ask this to you, how is Aviva looking at the future, which is a fairly uncertain one as it comes to regulations. One of the things that we did, and as registrants to this conference, you'll be getting a copy of it and a follow-up. We did a survey, AI in the enterprise. And one of the statistics in that, I can't remember the precise percentage, but it was something like about 70% of respondents, and these were all respondents for companies that were more than about $5 billion. They actually said, well, how do you feel about regulation? 70% of them said, we want more regulation. Now, when was the last time you heard that? Somebody standing outside the Houses of Parliament with a sign saying, regulate me. That just doesn't happen. But it shows you just how serious people are taking this. Paul, if you could perhaps comment from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, with a heavily regulated organisation, I mean, with assurance-backed asset manager, we, as standard, have got a heavily controlled, risk-averse approach to our investment decision-making process. So what hasn't changed is the process and our policies around that. So it might just be that the technology is slightly different, or we get to the result slightly differently, but fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, we need that traceability. So from a responsibility point of view, we have just continued that. So, immediately we did the obvious thing. We blocked everything. No one could access, ChatGPT on company devices, etc. But then what we then have done is put in place, as I mentioned, an environment that is safe, secure. It's a walled garden. We're not training any large language models. It's a point in time. There's plus and cons for that, but we're really looking at back to I think Heather mentioned the point as well around the biases and things like that. So we are very cognizant of it, but at the same time, what we don't want to do is stop the business growing, and at the same time, how do we do it at a pace that we're comfortable with? So we've got all the checks and balances you'd expect in place to do that. Could we do it faster? Potentially. We've got, as I mentioned, we're trying to grow. We're bringing people in from external organisations that haven't come from such a heavily regulated background, who are smaller asset management houses, independent asset management houses that haven't had the control framework, and that is causing some challenges for us. But at the same time, we have to, through our senior manager regime, through all of the different regulations that dictate how we work day in, day out, provide full transparency around that investment process. I've said it a few times, but that is absolutely key, and that is driving the responsible use of AI within investors.
So does that mean that you're using almost like a responsible AI framework as far as how you deliver solutions? Is there a process that you go through, a series of checkpoints to ensure that what you're doing is both regulatory compliant but also from an ethical standpoint as well?
Yeah, I mean, our software development lifecycle absolutely sort of fits into that, and then we've had to, for now, put an additional layer in place around the governance and usage of AI beyond, traditional AI, so the more generative side of things. I'm sure within 12 months we will refine that. If you'd gone back, particularly from our insurance business side of things, we've got 18 million customers within the UK, and initially it was you'd have an adverse reaction to Gen AI being involved in any way of that customer experience. Now, if you're a motor policy holder, the call handler on our side is getting information augmented, like their information is now being augmented, and our risk policy has changed around that. So, 12 months from now, I'm sure it'll be very different. But for now, we've deliberately, put additional wrapper and controls in place that ensure that we are, got that responsible AI checkpoint around it. But 12 months from now, I'm sure I'd expect us to have refined that a bit more.
And Laurence, from your perspective, I mean, obviously you mentioned the fact that you're almost on a kind of 90-day cycle of iterating the various solutions you have. That obviously presents some unique challenges in terms of, kind of bringing something to market. And when it used to be, it was like a year, maybe a year and a half. Now it's, once a quarter. How have you sort of baked into that process, safeguards to make sure that what you're delivering is, compliant with the necessary regulations and also from a responsible AI perspective?
And Carl, I'd just like to thank you for the idea of rolling back that far for an 18-month roll-around cycle. God, those were the days. I think for us, there's a separation in our 90-day cycle when it comes to developing and delivering things around our actual products, and how we deal with ethics, diversity, and equality in an organization. As an umbrella, we're highly invested in that. We were one of the first firms to sign up to the Canadian AI agreement about the use of AI, the ethical use of AI. And from our perspective, where we source our AI is where we've already done the diligence. So we've already done the diligence against specific LLMs that we use, that we work with. We work with specifically for us, for example, in one of the products I look after, we work a lot alongside Google and the responsibility around that. But from our perspective inside an engineering element, we actually test everything. And we test it from an ethnicity perspective, as well as an ethnicity perspective. As an example, in the recent case where the driver for a certain food delivery organization, who was a man of color, had to keep reauthorizing himself because the facial recognition didn't work because of his ethnicity. And for us, we were genuinely concerned. So we said, right, okay, stop what we're doing, which you never really can do, but metaphorically, stop what we're doing. We're going to check this. And we absolutely nailed it. And that proved to us, again, that the broader band of what we do from a protection as an organization for how we deliver and deal with public and people from our software is broader than the engineering cycle. The engineering cycle has to report into that, so that's part of it.
Yeah, and I think Heather touched on the fact as well. Just because you're in an appropriate place today doesn't mean you'll be in that place tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because by definition, these systems evolve, and sometimes, as she said, they start to decay. So you have to be ever vigilant in order to make sure that you maintain that level of compliance.
You do, because you have a responsibility. We're a software vendor, but we actually produce products and solutions that we sell to organizations that work with people. In the end, we talk about augmented intelligence, not to replace people, to make people better at what they do. I don't want to read 50 documents. I want to just get the answer to my questions. We augment the intelligence. I don't want the police officer to be looking at 45 hours of video. I want him to look at the criminally relevant 90 minutes. That's what I want to do. I want to augment that person, and we have to do that with an understanding of diligence for the human beings at the end of the piece of software.
Okay, so I think our time is pretty much up. I would like to perhaps give you each of maybe 30 seconds. If someone's just missed this panel and they've just walked in, what is the one thing each of you would say, if you walk away from this panel with one thing in your head, what should that be? Paul?
On the spot, I would say, make sure the value is there in terms of what you're going after. There's a lot of opportunity, so it's really identifying what the problem is and making sure that you can get value from the solution.
Laurence,
in 30 seconds, I think it's the same thing, roughly. The idea being, identify if you have a problem. To start off with, before you go racing down the I absolutely must stamp AI onto something, do you actually have a business problem? Yeah. Is there a solution? And then, is my data in line? And then, do I then apply AI to it? Don't fear AI, but you don't have to jump over the cliff with everyone else at the same time. That hype cycle is at that bit, and don't have to be on that.
Yeah.
Necessarily
don't do it just for technology.
Don't do it just because, especially, and I'm sure he won't be watching, but even if your CEO says so, or your CIO says so, or anybody on a C-level says, just because they say we should, that doesn't mean that you have to. Make sure you know what the problem is before you apply anything to it. Apply sense before you apply anything.
Yeah, I wrote a blog post a number of years ago about my gym, which installed a retinal scanner to get access to my locker room. And yes, you can do it, but should you do it?
Yeah.
And I think I titled it like, I want to work out, not launch a nuclear missile. And it's not doing technology for the sake of it. And as Paul said, there has to be a business reason for doing it. It's not just so, it'd be really kind of cool. And so with that, I'd like to thank very much Laurence and
Thank you.
Yes, Paul, sorry. I'm already...
Lasting impression, thank you.
Yes. Paul and Laurence, thanks very much indeed. I really appreciate your time.